Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another season of Sustaining Sustainability. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, Professor and Director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. This week, I'm joined from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, by Christine Waller, Vice President of Communications, ESG, and Corporate Giving at Duquesne Light Company. With a peak revenue of $942 million in 2021 and over 1,700 employees, Duquesne Light Company is dedicated to delivering safe, resilient, reliable, and affordable energy to more than 600,000 customers in southwestern Pennsylvania, including myself. Since joining Duquesne Light in December 2021, Christine has been responsible for leading the company's sustainability and community-focused communication and outreach strategy. Prior to this, she was the head of corporate social responsibility at Viatris, a multi-billion-dollar Pittsburgh area pharmaceutical company. In this role, she launched the company's corporate social responsibility strategy and oversaw environmental, social, and governance, also known as ESG, corporate giving, and community and stakeholder outreach. A Pittsburgh native, Christine has both a bachelor's degree in English and communication and a master's in public and international affairs from our very own University of Pittsburgh. Christine, welcome to the show.
Hi, CB. Thanks so much for the kind introduction and welcome.
Indeed. So, Christine, how was it to join Duquesne Light in the midst of the pandemic?
I have to say, I may have underestimated the challenge of joining an organization remotely, but the good thing is that as we've all evolved and come to understand new ways of collaborating and connecting with one another, Duquesne Light's a great place to be. They have a really unique hybrid work model. It's actually part of what attracted me to being with the company in that they allow for work to be done where it needs to be done and presence with a purpose, being in the office when there's a need or a desire to collaborate across functions or different levels. So the company is handling the hybrid work model very interestingly as it relates to the pandemic.
Interesting indeed. So, what is Duquesne Light's purpose and how has that evolved over time?
Well, you mentioned CB in your introduction. So Duquesne Light is the Pittsburgh region's electric utility company. That means that we transmit and distribute energy to different kinds of customers in our service territory, whether that be residential or large commercial customers. And one of the things about our purpose and our business model is that we really view ourselves as an essential service provider. So that's something that hasn't changed since the company's founding many years ago. But what has changed about our vision and our purpose is a real focus on enabling Pittsburgh's clean energy transition. So when our new CEO became, head of the company in June of last year, he built a new vision for the company focused on delivering a clean energy future for all. So while we've always been focused on safely and reliably supplying power to our customers, we now acknowledge the role that we also have to play as enabling infrastructure in our region's energy transition. So I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah, indeed. And the for all certainly brings a dimension of equity that is critical in this day and age, which I'm sure we will be touching on later in the conversation. So now you are kind of overseeing ESG at Duquesne Light. So what is Duquesne Light doing to improve ESG literacy and engagement with stakeholders, customers, regulators, elected officials, community partners, investors, etc.?
So ESG, I always like to begin a conversation around ESG, CB, if you don't mind, with a brief reminder and level set for our listeners about what we're talking about when we use that acronym, which you so appropriately provided the spelling out of this acronym in the introduction: environment, social, and governance. And I like to think about ESG as a lens applied to existing business strategy. In other words, what are the types of factors that a company needs to think about in order to advance its progress and advance its bottom line and its contributions to society? And that's really what ESG is all about, is thinking about those environmental risks and opportunities, social risks and opportunities related to how the company interacts with people, and then the policies and procedures that are in place through good governance to ensure that the company is set up for long-term success. So that conversation is one CB that we're first and foremost having with our employees. And we often think about, what are the external expectations of the company? What's the evolving regulatory landscape? But if your colleagues and, employees at the company aren't rallied behind these important topics and really seeking to understand the interconnected nature of them, then it's going to be hard to advance the company's strategy in the first place. So when we think about literacy and engagement, it's all about our employees first and foremost. And then from there, CB, the company began its sustainability journey a few years back. They conducted their inaugural materiality assessment, which really provided a view into what the most material topics are with respect to the company's ESG impacts. When I joined the company, we had a new CEO in place, new members of a leadership team, and the external context in which the utility is operating had significantly evolved since they last conducted this assessment. And so we've been in the process of refreshing that exercise. And I find this to be a really interesting tool to engage not only internally, as I already highlighted, but also with key external stakeholders to understand where they think you can make the biggest difference on the environment and on society and on the economy through your work. So the materiality assessment is a topic that I would highlight as a key engagement tool that we've been using.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important for our listeners to understand that every company cannot run after every goal. So we need to have priorities. And the materiality matrix or the materiality assessment is a scientific way, if I may be so bold, to come up with those priorities that a specific company can then put their weight behind. So, no, thank you for that. So, you talked about transition to clean energy and Duquesne taking that part seriously. So, what are some of the challenges around advocating for electric mobility or vehicles and thereby supporting that transition to clean energy?
So, CB, we aim to be a trusted partner to our customers as they choose to transition to electric mobility. Of course, from a cultural standpoint, we've seen a growing focus and interest in this market, but it's still in its early stages. And so, as the electric utility in the region, we are focused on supporting incentives and subsidies that exist in order to develop and grow this market, whether that's at the federal, state, or local level. The other piece is preparing for an increased demand for charging infrastructure, looking at how rates are set for the installation of different charging stations. But certainly an area that we support, knowing that it's a critical piece of not only the clean energy transition, but reducing poor air quality, reducing the emission of greenhouse gases. So it's an area that we're really excited about.
Right, 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 right. But you are kind of harnessing carbon-free solar energy to support employees who drive EVs, right? I thought we read there somewhere. Can you help explain to our audience how you're going about harnessing carbon-free solar energy to support employees who drive EVs? And do workers of the future care about this kind of offer?
Yeah, we did. So, CB, I would love to have you come and visit our Woods Run Service Center. It's on the north side. We actually have rooftop solar panels there and a 25-foot solar tree that we installed. And the installation provides up to 70,000 kilowatt hours of carbon free electricity per year. At that same facility, we operate 20 charging stations for employees who are driving EV cars or certain EVs within our company fleet. So we're seeing more and more interest from our employees in having the opportunity to drive EVs, and we incentivize them to do so. We offer free charging at that same service center. We connect them with, federal tax credit programs. The company actually offers an incentive for employees to go EV, and we see this, more and more that this is something that prospective candidates cite in the interview processes as being attractive to them.
So speaking of the future of the workforce, what challenges, and we talked about equity very early on in the conversation, what challenges is Duquesne Light facing in creating a more inclusive, safe, and equitable workforce for all?
So this is an area where I feel that Duquesne Light has made some really interesting strides forward in recent years. In fact, just last year, the company published its inaugural DE&I report, which they called Building a New Table Together. And I really like that concept of just inclusivity and, everyone sort of pulling up a chair, having a voice at the table. And that report outlines the company's DE&I efforts to date. That includes a focus on workplace DE&I, but also how we're showing up in the marketplace and in the community. I think it's really important to not only have a voice on this topic internally with your employees, but then to also be consistent in how you're providing products and services to your customers, how you're showing up in your philanthropic efforts and volunteerism. So it's a great report that I would encourage listeners to check out. It's available on DuquesneLight.com. With respect to the challenges that we're facing, the utility industry is an interesting one in that it's historically had an underrepresentation from women and people of color specifically. And the journey that we're on is certainly to attract new kinds of talent to the company, but then to make sure that they stay, through efforts around engagement and an intentionality around inclusivity that focuses on whether it's our employee resource groups, we have 3 of them, or ongoing training that we provide. So I'm really proud of the steps that the company's taking in this space, but like many others, we acknowledge that it's a journey and that we, have many steps yet to take.
Sure, but the first step is the hardest, and I'm glad to hear that both on all fronts, environmental, social, and governance, your organization is making progress. Fascinating conversation, but our time is coming to a close. So, what call to action would you make to our listeners?
I would say to consider Duquesne Light a partner in your journey to reduce your impacts on the environment, in your journey to stimulate economic growth, in your journey to make a difference for the community that we live in. So if you're working on projects that involve the use of electric utilities and power, engage us early and often in the work that you're doing to further our region's clean energy transition. Whether you're a customer sitting around the dinner table talking about how you can reduce your impacts, or whether you're a large developer maybe looking to bring business to our service territory. So we truly desire to be a partner, and we desire to be part of conversations in order to find solutions as our region experiences and drives the transition to a low carbon future.
Christine Waller, thank you so much for spending some of your precious time with us today.
CB, thanks for having me. It's great to talk with you.
And before I sign off, I do want to say this podcast is made possible with the help of my colleagues Chris Gassman, who is Senior Associate Director at the Center for Sustainable Business, Gabby Pogel, a Digital Marketing Specialist with the Center, and Kristen P. Ahern, our new Center Program Manager. We have many exciting guests lined up for this semester and look forward to sharing their stories, insights, and calls to action with you. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, and I hope to see you then for another edition of Sustaining Sustainability.